Finding Vanessa by Gas Station Jack. Chapter 8. In the center of town, there's an old cemetery connected to the Baptist church. Behind it, there's a service trail leading off into the woods, which connects to a dilapidated caretaker's cottage that's been out of commission since the 50s. When I was in school, it was a popular spot for kids to sneak away and make out or get high. I had a hard time imagining teens slipping back there these days, now that the forest had swallowed up any semblance of civilization. The path was overgrown and narrow, with low tree branches reaching out like the claws of forest giants, scratching the car on both sides as I drove slowly past. I pulled O'Brien's cruiser back there deep enough that nobody would spot it from the main road, killed the lights and engine, then got to work. I used the passcode I'd gleaned from Vanessa's file to get inside her phone and started with emails and texts. Not too much to see, but there was a long conversation chain with somebody named Toulouse. They had first started chatting a couple months ago. Vanessa: I had a good time yesterday. Looking forward to our next hang sesh. Toulouse: wow. Desperate much? Vanessa: LOL, kiss my ass. I'm trying to pay you a compliment. Toulouse: what the hell is a compliment? Is that some kind of sandwich? Vanessa: God, you are so weird. Vanessa: wanna come over and play Smash Brothers tonight? Toulouse: can't. Got a thing. Toulouse: it's super mysterious, yet important as fuck. Vanessa: sounds intriguing. Can I have a hint? Toulouse: gotta help a guy get rid of some bodies. Vanessa: well, when you're done, come play Smash Brothers. Vanessa: and bring beer. I'll spare you the gritty details, but there were a few times when I had to put the phone down and roll my eyes. Is this how kids flirt these days? Toulouse seemed mostly harmless, but immature even by teenager standards. I honestly couldn't tell what Vanessa saw in him, or her, but there's no accounting for taste, and Toulouse made her type, LOL, enough times that she must have enjoyed his company. There was nothing overtly sexual in their messages, just a strong overtone of two horny kids trying to figure themselves out. I felt like such a creep, but then reminded myself that this was what I did for a living. Stalking couples, waiting for cheaters to get busy, then stealing some photos while they were going at it. The only difference here was that I knew the person whose life I was digging into. But even still, I couldn't shake that nagging thought, this feels wrong. Vanessa and Toulouse's texts weren't as expositional as I'd hoped. A whole lot of "see you tomorrow's" gave me the impression that Toulouse was from work. A couple "I had fun last nights" told me that they had gone out for some not dates. A ton of emojis back and forth. Reminded me just how out of touch I was with this generation. And then the whole thing ended abruptly, with a few messages from Vanessa. Vanessa: hey. What ya doing? Vanessa: you there? I'm bored. Wanna hang? Vanessa: hello? Vanessa: I guess you're not talking to me anymore, huh? Toulouse: lose my number. Vanessa: WTF? What the hell did I do? Toulouse: Vanessa was a friend of mine, douchebag. Vanessa: I should have listened to everybody when they said that there's something wrong with your brain. You are an asshole. Toulouse: sorry, my bad, autocorrect. Toulouse: what I meant to say was... Toulouse: Vanessa was a friend of mine, you twat waffle fuckface. That's how it ended. The date of the last message put the conversation at about a week before her disappearance. I saved Toulouse's number on the burner I got from Roger and made a plan to track the line down once I had a moment's reprieve. The next step was checking her phone for pictures. I opened the gallery, scrolled down a ways, and started flicking through the slideshow in chronological order. Vanessa was a normal teenage girl, and she took what I would consider an average amount of selfies. One for every day or so. I studied them, looking for any sort of clue or indicator that something was wrong, or about to go wrong. But she was always happy. Always wearing that same old brown jacket and that same typical teenage girl smile. I had to smile when I first saw it. The jacket. I recognized it as the one Donnie used to wear all the time. It was a little too big on her, but she made it work. Starting around a month back, there were more frequent pictures of her. 4 or 5 or more each day. Not selfies though. Somebody else was taking pictures of her, with her phone, while she looked back and laughed. The last picture on her phone was taken an entire week and a half before she went missing. 2 days before her breakup text with Toulouse. And that last picture was the only one I needed to see. Motherfucker. The last photo showed her and Toulouse, cheek to cheek, smiling in a shared selfie, and I recognized the guy she was with instantly. When I had met him the day before, he said he didn't really know her all that well. Only back then I knew him as Jerry, and I was quickly running out of reasons not to beat the shit out of this guy. I lit a smoke to calm my nerves, then remembered I wasn't in my own car, and O'Brien might not be too merciful if she got her car back smelling like tobacco. I rolled down my window, and that's when I smelled it. That sour, putrid stench. The one from the bowling alley. I flicked on the headlights, illuminating the forest path in front of me, but as far as I could see it was empty. Then I heard it. Stomping through the overgrown trail far behind me, walking towards the cruiser from the cemetery, and I instantly realized why O'Brien always parked her car facing the road. I couldn't see what it was, but I could smell it from a mile away. The thing, whatever it was, kept walking. Closer and closer. The outline of its shape slowly taking form in the darkness, an unnatural juggernaut, enormous, wide, dark, and dragging something behind it that scraped at the road with each step. From this distance, there was no way for me to make out exactly what I was dealing with. It was protected by the shadows, and whatever manner of monster, one thing was glaringly obvious. I didn't want to be out here alone with it. I turned on the engine, then reached for the gear's shift and heard the sound of that thing's feet slamming into the ground as it sprinted down the path towards me with impossible speed. By the time I had the car in gear, it was there. The car rocked as the back window shattered into pieces, the roof buckled, and suddenly the front window erupted into a spiderweb of broken safety glass. I dropped my lit cigarette onto my lap and tried to figure out what the hell was going on. In the center of the smashed glass, a giant piece of metal wiggled and pulled itself free, then disappeared into the sky and came right back down into the windshield again with a loud impact that completely covered my entire field of vision in broken glass. The reality of the situation clicked into place and I screamed, "Oh shit!" That thing was standing on the roof of the cruiser, swinging a giant mallet into the windshield, and by the looks of it I didn't have long until there was nothing left between me and the hammerhead. Drive. I couldn't see anything in front of me, and even if I could I didn't have anywhere to go. The trail would dead end in the forest and I would be fucked. Reverse didn't feel like a much better option. The back window was busted out, but there was no light to guide me and I'd be pretty much flying blind. There wasn't enough room to turn around and I sure as shit wasn't going to leave the rapidly deteriorating safety of the vehicle. The piece of metal that had penetrated the laminated glass in front of my face started to budge, like the thing was getting ready to pull it back out for another swing, and I made a split-second decision to kick the car into reverse and put the pedal to the floor. We lurched backwards and started flying down the trail, but somehow the thing on the roof didn't fall off. An enormous hand, the size of a baseball glove, reached down and wrapped its fingers through my open window. Giant gray, inhuman digits gripped the roof just inches from my face, and I could see another hand on the opposite side as it smashed through the tempered glass of the passenger window. This titanic fuck was laying flat on top of the car, with an arm span wide enough to reach into both side windows at the same time. I kept my foot pressed hard on the gas while I yanked out my Beretta, pressed it against the roof, and fired off 3 shots. I would have fired a 4th, but the car bounced over a tombstone, and we went into a quick spin. I yanked the wheel back, gaining control without ever dropping speed. I'd cleared the forest road and hit the cemetery, and we were going over graves, colliding with markers, mowing over the smaller ones and ricocheting with the biggers. At one point I ran over the back bumper, and before I knew it we were through the ditch and back on the main road. There were street lights here, and I could actually see the path in front of me. I swung the wheel again, fishtailing into a near-perfect 90-degree turn that pointed me in a straight line down the road. We climbed in speed, and in no time I was redlining the RPMs, but the thing held firm onto the top of the car. The road was about to run out, a sharp dead man's curve to the left, and despite my performance up to this point, I wasn't so sure I'd be able to hook another turn at these speeds in reverse gear. If I stayed the course, I was going to crash into another dense portion of forest. So I made one more split-second decision. I picked up my gun, put it against the roof again, then started shooting. At the same moment I slammed the brakes, sending us into a long skid, tires screeching against the road loud enough to wake the dead. The thing finally flew off the top of the car and landed somewhere between the trees across the ditch with a loud crash. I immediately pointed the gun back there and waited to see if it was going to get up. The only sounds were those of the unhealthy rattle of the cruiser engine and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I still hadn't gotten a good look at it, and now I couldn't even tell where the thing was. "What are you doing? Get out of here!" I turned in my seat to face forward, then realized that I still couldn't see out the front window. The shattered laminated glass held in place was impossible to look through. I pointed my gun at it, then caught myself. That won't work. This isn't a fucking movie. Okay, so what are my options? There weren't any. I had to get that windshield out, or this car was useless. I put the cruiser in park, opened my door, took a breath, and stepped out onto the road, bracing myself for another attack. That thing wasn't too far away. I knew that much from the horrendous smell that continued its assault on my senses. My gun wasn't about to leave my hand until I was at least 10 miles down the road. When a few seconds had passed, I finally turned half my attention away from the forest and looked at the deputy's cruiser. The vehicle looked like I felt, beat to hell and back and running on fumes and prayers. The sides were scraped up and covered in dirt, and the frame was dented in to the point that any reasonable insurer would call it totaled twice over. But somehow, the engine was still running, and the car could still go, and right now that was all I needed from it. Yeah, if I managed to survive all of this, O'Brien was going to kill me. The mammoth mallet still sticking out of the windshield was a metal-gripped sledgehammer. I climbed onto the hood of the car and grabbed the thick handle with my free hand and pulled until it started to come free of the glass. This wasn't going to be easy. The tool was a custom job, a steel pole, thick enough that I could barely grip it with one hand, welded to a block of square metal. A weapon for someone or something way stronger than me. Before too long I realized that this heavy bastard was a two-handed job and begrudgingly holstered my gun for just a moment, while I put all of my strength into yanking that hammer out of the glass and dragging it off the car onto the road. Without a doubt, the weapon weighed more than I did. On the bright side, the hole that the sledgehammer left in the windshield was big enough that I could see through, and I didn't waste any more time before putting some distance between myself and that thing in the woods. I left the cruiser parked behind the daycare center a few blocks from Vanessa and Jamie's house, then made my way through backyards, praying there wouldn't be any unchained pit bulls along the way. For once luck was on my side, and I got to my brother's backyard without any hitches. I was annoyed to find that the back door was unlocked. It was clear that Jamie was way too trusting to live in this town on his own, and this just reinforced that I had made the right call in what I was about to do. "Hey, kiddo!" I yelled from the kitchen, suddenly realizing for the first time that I had fucked up my ears. I snapped my right finger next to my head to confirm, and I was definitely deaf in that ear. He came out of his bedroom and took one look at me before saying, "You look like you've been in a fight." I turned my head slightly to point my good ear at him and responded, "You should see the other guy." Could be temporary. Maybe not. It's weird that I could make it this far without realizing I had fucked my ears up. Yeah, adrenaline really is a wonder drug. "We need to get you out of town," I said. "Right now." "What? Why?" "We don't have time to discuss it. I'll explain in the car. Get packed, only what you need and can't live without for the next 48 hours, understand? Leave your phone. Leave any electronics. You get 30 seconds to pack. Now move." "Uncle Eric, I don't think I see a dash. 28 seconds. Did I stutter?" He ran back into his room, and I pulled out Roger's burner and called O'Brien. She picked up after the first ring and said, "Yeah? Okay, I need that favor as soon as you can. Don't say I never did anything for you." She hung up, and I crossed into the living room, over to the blinds, and peeked out. The deputies sitting outside in unmarked sedans couldn't have been more obvious if they'd tried. I could see Williams, reclined in his front seat and playing a game on his cell. If this was all I was up against, it would be an embarrassment to get caught. But the real threat was still out there, and I'd have to give these guys the slip first. I watched as Williams got the call over his radio, sat up, and answered before he pulled out of his spot and drove away, followed shortly by 2 other cars. O'Brien would have just called in the report. Shots fired at the high school. Eric Riggin had lost his mind and started trading lead. She was pinned down and needed backup. The distraction would give us just enough time to get out of there. I yelled towards Jamie's room. 10 seconds, kid. Don't forget your jacket." That was the moment. The moment it all slipped into place for me. They say your subconscious keeps working on problems when they're in the back of your mind, even when you don't realize what you're actually looking for. It's not what's there but shouldn't be. I'd read the report on Vanessa more times than I could recall. That night she disappeared. Was a cool one. And damn near every picture of her on that phone had one thing in common. She was always wearing Donnie's old brown jacket. Jamie came out of his room with a backpack slung over his shoulder and said, "Okay, I'm ready. The night your sister went missing, you said she was wearing a yellow t-shirt?" The question caught him by surprise. "Yeah. So? Was she wearing her jacket?" He shook his head. "No, I don't think so." "You don't think so? Or you're sure?" "I'm sure. I'm positive. She wasn't wearing Dad's jacket." His lip quivered, and I got the sense that maybe he was hiding something. "Jamie, look at me. Is there something from that night you aren't telling me?" No. He was lying. It was written all over his face. He stared at the floor and said, "Can we just go now?" I walked past him to Vanessa's room. We were spending precious seconds here, but this was important. I knew I was onto something, just not sure what it meant yet. It's what should be there but isn't. I had already gone through every single thing in this room, but I needed to see if maybe I had somehow missed it. Donnie's old jacket had struck a nerve when I saw it in the pictures. I recognized it the moment I saw her wearing it. I would have had that same reaction if I'd seen it in here earlier, but I hadn't. Jamie came into the room while I was digging through the clothes hung up in her closet. "What is it?" he asked. "Does your sister have any laundry anywhere?" "No, she did a load the day before she went missing." "What about her jacket? Have you seen it anywhere? Do you know where it ended up?" "No. Maybe she left it in her car." I knew for a fact it wasn't in the car. And it wasn't here in her room. And she wasn't wearing it when she disappeared. That thing was clearly more than just a piece of clothing to her. It looked stupid, but she wore it to work every day anyway, so it had to have some sentimental value to her. So where the hell was it? "Jamie, this is important. Are you sure you don't know where the jacket is?" "I swear. I have no idea." "Why?" "Don't worry about it. We need to go. Now. We took the back roads, headed away from the school. Jamie was kind enough not to make a big deal out of how junky my car had gotten, ignoring the fast food containers and empty liquor bottles on the floor. I kept one eye on the rearview mirror and waited until we were a few miles from his place before I started digging into that suspicious look he'd given me earlier when I asked if there was more to the story. Jamie, I need to ask you some more questions. Okay, fine. That night Vanessa went missing. I know it's hard, but I need you to go back there again and walk me through the whole thing. What was the first thing you remember that day? I don't know. Okay, we'll start with that night. You were watching television, and she came out of her room, didn't say a word, and walked right out the door. Is that correct? Yeah, that's what happened. Okay, what were you watching? He stammered. I don't know. I don't remember. But you do remember exactly what she was wearing? Yeah. That's a little weird. Your memory sure was being selective that night, huh? I hated this, but it had to be done. You can't treat him like family. He's a witness, and he's hiding something, so nut up and grill him. Look, I told you everything that was important. That was important? What aren't you telling me, kid? He was silent, so I slammed on the brakes and yelled, Hey! Tell me what you're keeping secret. I just spent the last 2 days getting the shit kicked out of me by every fucking weird thing in this town. The last thing I need is for my own blood to start lying to me, too. I'm not lying, he shouted back with tears in his eyes. It just wasn't important, okay? Bullshit. I'll decide what's important. You just tell me the truth. The tears were running down his face as he said, We had a fight, okay. About what? I don't even know. Just some stupid stuff. I thought she had been acting weird, like there was something wrong with her. And then, the last thing I said to her. He lost it at that point, sobbing into his hands loud and ugly and real. It broke my heart, but I knew we were getting somewhere. Look, I loved your dad, okay? And I know he loved me too. He was my only sibling. And we used to get into fights all the time. Not just play fights. Something about growing up together gives you the ammo to really hit someone where it hurts. We could tear each other apart. But at the end of the day, I knew we were family, and nothing could change that. Your sister loved you, and an entire lifetime of being your big sis isn't going to get wiped out over one stupid fight. You don't understand, he sobbed. The last thing I said to her was that Mom was right. Shit. What did you mean by that? I told her I didn't really believe she was my sister, then she left. And that's the last time anyone saw her. I think I made her dash. No, shut up, don't you dare say that, don't even think it. Your sister was smarter than me, she didn't do anything. You didn't make her do anything. Somebody took her, and when I find out who, I'm going to make them pay. Do you think she's still alive? I didn't answer. I just started driving again and watched the road. What the ever-loving fuck is this? O'Brien yelled while I stood in her doorway with Jamie at my side. We didn't have anywhere else to go. Literally anywhere else in the fucking world, Eric. Not my house. Hey, she called me. Eric. I let her scream and yell and make a big deal about it, and once she was done I pointed out the fact that this wasn't for me. It was for my 15-year-old nephew, and at that point she couldn't really say no. She had sobered up a lot in the couple hours since the bar, where I had convinced her to call in the bogus shooting at the school. After that, I gave her a ride home in Vanessa's car. Then I stole her keys, went back to the bar, and stole her cruiser, but she didn't know about that part yet, and I was fine with letting her figure it out on her own later, after I was dead or out of town. Once Jamie was safe inside O'Brien's house, I turned to leave. Aren't you coming inside too? No, I've got someone I need to talk to first. That's too bad, she said. Do me a favor? Try not to die. My next stop was at the shitty gas station at the edge of town. I pulled into the parking lot to find Toulouse with a water hose. smoking a cigarette and spraying down the concrete. I parked, got out, went up to him, then snatched him by the neck and put him against the wall. He calmly took the cigarette out of his mouth, smiled at me, and said, "Hey detective. What's up?" I held Vanessa's phone next to his face. The picture on the screen was the selfie he had taken with her. The last picture to be taken before she disappeared. "Wanna tell me anything?" I asked. "Not particularly, but if it'll keep you from kicking my ass, I'll tell you whatever you want." "It will," I lied. "Okay, so here's the thing, Van and I were close. But you're like her dad pretty much, and I don't do well with parents. You've got 3 seconds to stop with the bullshit before I make you eat this phone." "Okay. Fine. You got me. I lied to you because I didn't know if you were really looking for her or if you were one of them. Cut it out with the vague pronouns. Who are them?" "I have no idea. The ones that took Van." I put the phone in my pocket, pulled my Beretta, and put it to his head, just in case there was any confusion about whether or not I meant business. But Jerry just chuckled and said sarcastically, "Oh no, not a gun against my head. Look, detective, believe it or not, this ain't my first rodeo. Just tell me what you know." "Well, you wouldn't have believed it yesterday. But maybe now you're ready. The truth is that somebody took Van. But it wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was more like a month ago. I figured it out right away. That thing that came into work the next day, that wasn't her. Sure, it looked like her, and it acted like her, but I wasn't going to be fooled. Now, I know you're not going to believe this, but I have a little experience with clones, and she wasn't a very good one." I tried to figure out what I thought of this. Honestly, I couldn't decide. Toulouse took my hesitation as an opportunity to put his cigarette back in his mouth and take a drag. I let go of his neck, then put my piece away and asked, "Why would somebody want to clone Vanessa?" "Isn't it obvious? She was the test run. If she could infiltrate Vanessa's real life without raising suspicions, then they would know that their recipe works. But it didn't, so she had to go before anyone with credibility realized what had happened. That was a couple weeks ago. It's entirely possible that they're still switching people out. Maybe they fixed the kinks in Vanessa, and now we don't even know who's real and who's been replaced. What's the point in switching people out with clones?" "Well, duh. This is an invasion, man." He finished his smoke and flicked it off into the grass. Then I asked, "The night Vanessa went missing, the real night she went missing, assuming this is true, did you see her?" "Yeah, we were together." "Do you remember what she was wearing?" "What?" "Can you tell me what she was wearing the night she actually disappeared?" Jerry thought for a second, then said, "Hold on one sec," before digging out his cell phone, flicking through a few photos, then holding it out to me, showing a video he had recorded of Vanessa and him taking turns tossing 2-liter bottles of soda to each other, while the other tried to cut them in half with a sword. In that video, she wore jeans, a green long sleeve, and Donnie's brown jacket. When it was finished, Toulouse smiled proudly to himself and put the phone back in his pocket. "That was the last night before, as you say, she was taken and replaced?" "Yeah. I had just gotten that rad sword and came up here to try it out. We ended up breaking it like 2 days later, but it was totally worth it." This was textbook crazy, but what he was saying made some kind of sense. There was no denying the facts. After that night in Toulouse's video, Vanessa started acting differently. Her best friend confirmed it. Her brother confirmed it. Even her phone confirmed it. She'd stopped taking selfies. For 2 weeks, it was like she was a different person. And then, the final straw, her own brother told her that he knew she wasn't the real Vanessa, and then... What? She gets out of there before anyone else has a chance to suspect? "Whoa, dude, what is that smell?" asked Toulouse. I snapped out of it, realized what he was referring to, and pulled out my gun. "That thing. The juggernaut. It was here. And from the smell, I knew it was somewhere close by. "Get inside and lock the doors," I said. "Okie doke," he answered before bounding into the gas station building. I pointed the gun, scanning the edges of the parking lot where the lights met darkness. And then I heard it, walking through the forest on the opposite side. I kept the gun aimed in the direction that the noise was coming from, a strange inhuman gurgling breath, and the loud dragging of something heavy through the brush. I walked towards the noise. This was going to be a showdown, and if that thing killed me, I didn't want it taking out Toulouse just because he was there. Then, it stepped out of the forest, and for the first time I saw it, and my blood ran cold. Chapter 9. The thing, the juggernaut, almost looked human, in the same way a child's crayon drawing might almost look like a horse. The pieces were there, but the proportions were way off. It towered an easy 7 feet, even with the clear curvature of the spine that gave it a sideways hunch. The body was inhumanly wide, like an upright grizzly. The hands, a dark shade of ashy gray, were hairy and composed of fingers like sausages and nails blackened from blood ruptures. As it dragged the sledgehammer across the pavement, it moved with an arrhythmic gait, as if it were still learning to walk on 2 legs of different sizes. Like a chimera from the ancient stories, this creature stalking ever closer was made up of mismatched parts. The head didn't come close to anything remotely human, but its visage is burned into the core of my memory in a place where no amount of therapy will ever allow me to forget. The face, if you can call it that, was coated in black scales and comprised of an elongated snout that formed the top half of a jaw. The bottom was equally long, connected at a hinge like that of an alligator, with ivory hooks growing wildly in every direction from the maw. If the monster had any eyes, I couldn't see them. The lipless orifice hung open, exposing a wet tongue tangled in the jagged rows. The teeth were overgrown like a cancer, and there was no way the mouth could ever close without shredding the gums to pieces. I don't know how it ate, and I wasn't keen on finding out. The noise coming from within was a wheezing gurgle, steady, with each shallow breath. For the life of me I can't figure why, but somebody had gone through a lot of effort to dress him. On the outside, an extra long black duster. Beneath, the body was more or less contained within a long-sleeved blue jumpsuit, and on its feet were a new pair of enormous black tactical boots. There was a sort of fog about the creature, and as it came closer I realized that the humming cloud around its face was actually a thick swarm of flies. Festering boils on its neck wriggled with maggots, and I became dizzy just trying to fathom what I was beholding. This must have been what they thought of when they first invented the word abomination. I kept my Beretta steady, waiting for the thing to charge. With the way it ran back at the bowling alley and in the cemetery, I likely wouldn't have but a split second, if that, to take it down. The gun was pointed at the widest point on its center of mass, the chest, where I quickly noticed a cluster of bullet holes already in the jumpsuit, stained black. Looks like I hit him already. Whatever this thing was, my pathetic 9mm wasn't going to do more than annoy it. But at this point, running simply wasn't in the cards. Yet again, I found myself with the ever-familiar feeling of being a sitting duck. Think fast, you're running out of time. Options? Run? Hide? No, too late for that. Shoot it? The thing took 4 shots to the chest before you launched him off the car. He's not going down from bullets. Unless... headshot? Could work. Go for the weapon? Shoot his hands? Also valid options. But even without that hammer, a charge from that thing would be like getting run over by a truck. I need to slow him down. Slow him down. That's the play. I can keep a hammer's distance, but not if this thing starts moving like he did earlier. I pointed the gun at his knee and fired 6 shots in rapid succession. The cloud of flies exploded off the monster after the first impact, and the creature stopped. But it didn't go down. It stood still with that expressionless reptilian face. I waited. After a tiny eternity, the thing shifted its weight to the good leg and lifted the wounded one, moving it clumsily forward, then landing. I held my breath and watched as it tried out the injured limb, then dragged the metallic weapon forward and moved its other leg. It had just taken another step, and all those shots had succeeded in doing were jack and shit. The cloud of flies had returned to the area around the monster, and I prepared myself to go out swinging. When he charges, start shooting. If there's a reason God decided not to let me die right then and there, I don't know what it could be. I'm not a good person. I've barely done anything in my time on this earth to make anybody miss me when I'm gone. But whatever the reason, this was not going to be the moment I had to face my maker. The partial deafness from the gunshots coupled with the situational blinders kept me from noticing the black vans until they had sped past me and screeched to a stop. I didn't see where the smoke grenades came from, but the parking lot was swallowed in the thick gray in a matter of seconds. The last thing my eyes were able to pick up was the juggernaut lifting the weapon over its head. When the shots started, I hit the ground. By my count, I was dealing with at least half a dozen fully automatic weapons. I held my breath and started to crawl away from the fray. The next thing I remember was waking up on the floor of a moving vehicle with a splitting pain in my side reminding me of all the shit I'd put my body through that day. I was on my back when I came to and sat straight up. How the hell did I get here? The van rocked back and forth as we drove. There were no windows back here, only bench seats against the walls and 5 heavily armed men in camo fatigues and tactical gear. In front of me was a 6th man, only he didn't have a weapon, or helmet, or any kind of gear. He was dressed in a tan t-shirt and jeans, and when he saw that I was awake, he smiled and said, "He's up. Good. Welcome back." Where am I? I instinctively reached for the spot on my side and found nothing but an empty holster. One of the armed men put a firm hand on my shoulder. His way of saying, "Take it easy, and no sudden moves." "Don't worry. You're safe now," said the man in jeans. "That's not what I asked," I said back. "Who are you people?" "We've been watching you for a while, detective. You're lucky we showed up when we did." This is it. I'm finally getting to see the man behind the curtain. "Where's Vanessa?" I demanded. "Well," the guy shot back, "you really have no idea what's going on, do you?" "I know enough. I know you're part of some shady organization with reach and pull. I know you're working on something big, and you're willing to kill to keep a lid on it. And I know my niece was involved somehow." I was showing my hand, but at this point I didn't even care. They had me dead to rights, and even if I played dumb, there was no way they were going to let me off with a warning. "I also know you're responsible for what's been going on in this town. The disappearances, the phone calls from the dead, the weather. I don't know how, but I know you dash." "Let me stop you right there," he interrupted. "You're embarrassing yourself. Because not one part of that was correct. Yeah, there's something going on here, but we're not it. We didn't take Vanessa. We've been trying for years to find out who, or what, is actually responsible for all of this." "Bullshit. You're saying that this shithole small town just happens to have 2 secret paramilitary organizations?" He laughed. No. Definitely more than 2. The van made a sharp right turn and I started tracking seconds. I couldn't be sure how long I was out, or even how they knocked me out to begin with. But if I made it out of this van alive, I might be able to retrace my steps. "Let me ask you something, detective. How much time have you spent at that gas station? I mean, concurrently? Because it looks like you actually slept there. That place messes with your head, you know. Most people can't stand it for more than a couple hours at a time." I ignored his question and asked my own. "So if you're not the ones that took Vanessa and framed me, then who the hell are you?" "You can consider us an interested third party." "Yeah," I replied, echoing Spencer's words from yesterday. There sure seem to be a lot of those in this town. The man pulled a gun out from beneath his seat and pointed it. Before I could move, the men on either side of me clamped down their grips on my shoulders, holding me in place. I looked at the gun and recognized it as my own Beretta. "You Army?" the man asked. I knew this guy. He was a ranger in the Army. You remind me of him. "No, I'm not Army." The man nodded, then stared at the ground, like he was trying to decide what to say next. The van made another right turn and I restarted my count. "It's weird that you would be so careful, constantly watching your rear view, switching up cars, keeping an ear to the ground, and still you couldn't find the tracking device they put in your gun. Don't worry, we took it out. They have no idea where we are now." "They?" "The ones that actually took your niece." I wasn't buying this story for a second. After everything they had tried to throw me off the trail, this was just another elaborate setup. But why? Why not just let that thing kill me and be done with it? Were they testing me to see what I knew? How much I had figured out? For what it's worth, we've been trying to find her. But these guys are careful. They cover their tracks, avoid every camera, leave no footprints. Then you came along and they got sloppy, they got frustrated, and they sent a knight after a pawn. No offense. "Oh, fuck you," he continued. "We finally captured one of their tall guys. And all we had to do was piggyback off their tracking device and follow you until it decided to show. This is a big deal for us." The van turned to the right. "They're driving in circles." At this point I knew that there were two possibilities. Either this guy was telling the truth, or he was lying. And I couldn't decide which was worse. But regardless, one thing was clear. I needed to get out of this van if I wanted to live. Once they were done questioning me, I was just a loose end. "Okay," I said, trying to buy time. "You're the good guys. You want to take out the other secret organization. You must know more about them than me, right? You know about Planet X? Scientists have known for years that there's another planet out there, because they can see the effects. Jesus, does every person in this town talk in sermons? They don't know what it looks like or even where it is, but they know it's there. This organization we've been tracking is huge, but all we get to see are the gravitational effects." "Gravitational effects? Is that what you call an 18-year-old girl vanishing without a trace?" He kept the gun pointed at me and reached his free hand into his pocket to pull out a cell phone. As he typed on it one-handed, he spoke. "They sent one of the tall guys to grab her after she left the gas station. We tried to catch up to them, we really did. And to be frank, we thought she was dead. Until the next day when she showed up for work like nothing had ever happened. Took us a while to realize that the girl that came back wasn't really Vanessa Riggin." "So you took her, right? Kidnapped the double agent for questioning. That's where this story is headed, isn't it?" He pressed a button on the phone and held it out to me while a video played. I instantly recognized the aerial view of Vanessa and Jamie's neighborhood at night. The source must have been a drone, but it was steady and clear. "This is the night she officially went missing." The camera was wide, but I could see the house in focus. I watched as the front door opened and Vanessa walked calmly to the edge of her driveway in jeans and a yellow t-shirt. She looked down the road at something out of frame, and then I saw it. The sheriff's cruiser pulled to a stop and she got in the passenger seat. And then, they drove away. What is this? What in the ever-living fuck is going on in this town? Are you familiar with the theory of pocket realities? The steady pop, 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 pop from somewhere in the distance arrested all of our attention. I instantly recognized it as automatic weapon fire, maybe a mile or so out, and I could see the moment the same realization registered on the man's face. He jumped out of his seat and grabbed a radio from somewhere in the front of the van and yelled into it. "Victor, come in! We hear gunfire. Is the package secure?" There was no response from the other end of the radio, but the gunfire continued. And then it didn't. We all held our breath and waited, until the man yelled at the driver. "Turn around, we need to help them." I wasn't going to get a better distraction than this. I jumped out of my seat, wrapped an arm around the man's neck, and spun him back towards the other men as a human shield. Before he knew it, I had my Beretta again, and it was pressed against his head. "You're making a mistake. We weren't going to hurt you." "I'll take my chances." I grabbed the handle of the van door, yanked it open, and dove out into the wet grass. I tried my best to tuck and roll, but I still ripped open my stitches and bruised both elbows before sliding down the hill towards the forest. I could hear the van screeching to a stop while I pulled myself up and ran into the thick cover of the trees. I spent hours out there in the dark, doing my damnedest to keep moving no matter what. I couldn't know if they were following me or not, but I wasn't going to take any more chances. Eventually I hit a creek bed and followed it upstream until I reached an old bridge, then I collapsed under it and slept until morning. After those few precious hours of rest, I started following the road back towards town. I put my thumb out to the first passer-by, hoping I might get lucky, and amazingly it pulled over. The car was a new model shiny red Firebird, and the driver was an old woman that I knew from my childhood, Aggie Sistrunk. She didn't recognize me. She was already old when I was a kid, and at this point I wonder if she even knows what day it is. Old Aggie offered me a swig of her medicine while she drove me back into town. I politely declined. Then she asked me where I was headed, and I gave her the address. Clyde didn't get home until around noon, which gave me plenty of time to raid his pantry, clean up my wounds, and of course search his house for clues. I came up empty in that last category, but I had already assumed that was going to happen. If he were one of them, he wouldn't be sloppy enough to leave evidence of it in his underwear drawer. Not that it was really much of an if anymore. I saw him in that video. He was the one driving the car that picked up Vanessa on the night she went missing. I should have seen it earlier. Of course the sheriff would have to know what's going on. An operation this size can't fly under law enforcement radar forever. I wasn't expecting him to come home until much later, but I was ready just in case. I surprised him in his kitchen and let the Beretta do most of the talking. "Hey there, Sheriff. Fancy seeing you here." He went pale, but he didn't reach for his gun or put up a fight. I was hoping he wouldn't, but prepared just in case. Fortunately, things were working out. I took his gun and walked him into the den. There were no windows in here, no weapons, and the seats were arranged far enough apart that I could sit across from him without having to worry about him making a move. Once his ass was down on the couch, I poured him a glass of his most expensive scotch and set it on the coffee table in front of him. A professional courtesy. I took my seat on the divan across the room and broke the long silence. "I have to assume you know why I'm here. You're a lunatic." "Maybe. Try harder. We found the body in the trunk of Vanessa's car. I don't know why you're doing this. Pull my other leg and it plays jingle bells." What followed was another heavy silence. I could see he wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to do it. That was fine by me. As long as I was on this side of the gun, I didn't mind waiting. Finally, he broke down and grabbed the drink and put the whole glass back in one go. Then he said, "Well, how much do you know?" "That's not how this works, Clyde. You tell me what you know." "I had nothing to do with Vanessa's abduction." "Bullshit. You picked her up the night she disappeared." "What?" "No, I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about Vanessa. The girl I picked up that night wasn't even Dash." He caught himself and took a long, sad breath before continuing. "I had very specific instructions for what I was supposed to do if this ever happened." "Instructions? From who? Tell me who you work for and this will all be over soon." He gave me a chilling look that I'll never forget and said, "Thanks for the drink, detective. I should have been smarter." I'll never forgive myself for being so careless. For not giving him a thorough pat down. In the midst of all of my planning, it had never even occurred to me that he might have a second piece. The gun in his ankle holster was a PS1 single shot. A pocket shotgun. Before I could scream no, he put the gun in his mouth, ate the bullet, and painted the walls of the living room. Jesus. Fucking Christ. My brain kicked into overdrive. Why would he do that? What do I do now? What's the play? I had no answers, but an overwhelming urge to get away from here as soon as possible. The cell phone in my pocket began to ring. Roger was calling. Do I answer? Does he know what happened? Can he help? I let it ring while I weighed the options. What options? There are no options. You leave this house, make sure there's no DNA, no. Prince, get the fuck out of Dodge or you'll go down as a cop killer. Yeah, my choices were looking pretty limited. I answered the phone. Finally. I was starting to think they got you. Roger, listen to me. I'm in deep shit. Is this line secure? Detective, this might be the only line in the whole town that isn't being monitored, but I can guarantee you that it's just the two of us. I need to tell you two things. The sheriff is dead. I didn't kill him. There was a lull in the conversation so long that I had to wonder if I'd been disconnected. And then Roger came back on the line with, "Oh, this is bad. Real bad. Should I assume you are with the late sheriff right now? You can assume. Then you need to get out of there yesterday, because the chatter on the radio is all about the shots fired at the sheriff's house. And that call came in 10 minutes ago. Fuck." I made a break for the front door, but stopped at the window when I saw the flashing lights outside. I turned and ran to the back door, pushed it open, and took off towards the fence. But before I made it 2 steps, I was surrounded. Every deputy was working that day, actually, all but one, and there were more guns pointed at me than I could count. I dropped to my knees, threw up my hands, and closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. They tackled me hard. Someone pushed his knee against my neck while they twisted my arms behind my back and put on the metal bracelets. A team of them dragged me out front and tossed me into the back of a squad car, and they left me there to cook for an hour. The whole time, the only thing I could think was, why am I still alive? When they had finally sorted out the crime scene, I was taken to the sheriff's station. I did my best to cooperate, but that didn't stop them from slamming me into a few walls or taking turns sucker punching me in the back and kidneys. To them, I was a monster. I was lower than garbage. And they were taking me to be with the only other person as bad as me. The holding room was small, dark, and windowless. Only big enough for 2 cells, and those cells were just simple metal cages. They threw me into the one closer to the door, then locked the cage behind me. Then they left us alone in there, shutting the door to the holding room and bolting the lock into place. I looked at the man standing on the other side of the metal bars. The man trapped in the other cage. He smiled and laughed at me from his cot against the wall and said, "You look like shit, Riggin." "Yeah, I've been better," I said. Spencer Middleton stood up and walked over to the bars, leaning against them as he said, "I think you should know something. This is only going to get worse." I reflexively took a step back. He'd gotten the jump on me once before, and I sure as shit wasn't going to stand close enough for him to grab me through the bars. "I'm not sure it can get much worse. I've been in this cell for a week now. Trust me, it's going to get worse." He smiled and scratched the scar on his neck. "I suppose you don't feel like taking this opportunity to tell me what the fuck is going on, do you? I'll tell you what's going to happen. They're going to spin a yarn about you. Just like they did about me. They'll sell some bullshit. The news will polish the bullshit. The people will eat the bullshit. And you, eventually you'll start believing it too. They're all going to lie to you, but not me. I'll never lie to you. You want to know why?" "Why?" Because I know that the truth is so much worse." He laughed another long, self-satisfied laugh and turned to go back to his cot. As he got comfortable, he added, "You and me are gonna have a lot of fun, Riggin." I looked at the cot on my side of the cell. It wasn't much. Not long enough for me to lay on without my feet and elbow hanging off the edges, but it was better than the floor. And right now, the idea of getting some real sleep was sounding pretty damned inviting. I woke up to the sound of a loud clang against the bars of my cell. The man standing on the other side next to the exit was the one I had left in handcuffs outside of the hardware store the day prior. The bruise over Franklin's jaw was already a pronounced deep purple, and I have to admit I was a little proud of it. I could see the thing he had used to wake me, a police baton in his right hand. No doubt this was going to be his turn for a little petty revenge. "All right. Let's get this over with." "Howdy, deputy," I said, standing to my feet and immediately remembering that my body was still beaten and bruised. If it had been an option, I might have just stayed in that cot until the judge threw the book at me and they put a needle in my arm. "It's time for your one phone call," Franklin said unemotionally. He led me down the hall and into another small room, where I was pretty sure I was about to get another round of beatings. But shockingly, the only thing in there was a small table and a corded telephone which sat with the receiver off the hook next to it. Franklin locked the door and nodded at the table. "What's going on?" I approached the table, anxiously awaiting some sort of trap, but none came. Once I was certain that Franklin wasn't going to crack open my skull with his baton, I reached out, grabbed the telephone receiver, and put it to my ear. "Hello?" I said. The voice on the other end of the line was sad and tired, but familiar. "Detective, I'm sorry it's come to this. I've tried every other plan I could think of, but I'm afraid we're out of choices. We go nuclear, or we all lose." It was Roger. "The thing is, well, I'm sure you've already worked it out on your own. I'm not leaving this place alive. I'm sorry. Honestly, I'm surprised I made it this far. You remember our agreement? I'd help you best I could, and in return I wanted a favor. Well, this is it. I'm calling in my favor. And prepare yourself, because it's going to be a doozy." Franklin took out his gun and I quickly scanned the room for a weapon to defend myself with. But then, he surprised me and turned the gun around and held it out. He said with a frown, "Make it look good." I snatched the gun away from him. "What is this?" I asked. Roger answered, "Your deputy friend here owed me a favor. And now, well, you know what to do. Try not to hurt him too bad." Franklin closed his eyes and I swung the weapon hard, cracking him across the face and spurting blood all over the floor where he landed. "Good," said Roger. I don't know how the hell he could see me, but at this point I didn't care. "Now listen carefully, detective. Because this is your turn. I know you know how to use that thing. There's only one way this story ends with anything remotely resembling a happy ending. You have to go into that cell right now and put a bullet in Spencer Middleton's head. No half measures are going to work. You have to kill him." "Why?" I demanded. "They need him. I'm sure by now you've figured this whole thing out. The invasion? Well, Spencer's the only one who knows where to find the ingredients they need to build their army. Just tell me one thing. Is Vanessa alive?" "I'm sorry, Eric. I put the phone on the receiver and prepared myself. Am I really going to do this? What else could I do? Take Franklin's gun, shoot my way out of the sheriff's station? No. I was done for. The only thing I could do is make my death count for something. And there was no person on this planet that I could say was more deserving of a bullet behind the ear than Spencer fucking Middleton. But was I really going to be the one to literally pull the trigger? I took Franklin's keys, cracked the door, and looked out. This was a straight, empty hallway. On one end, the way out through the station, full of angry men with guns. On the other, the holding room. My heart pounded in my ears as I walked alone back to that room and put the key in the lock. Spencer was staring right at me when the door opened, like he had been waiting for me. "Well, look at you," he said. "They turned you into their little bitch, huh? Turn around," I ordered. He refused to look away as he said, "Let me tell you something. If you're going to shoot me, you had better not miss." Spencer was expecting this. I chambered a round into Franklin's gun and prepared myself to do what I had to do. Spencer was part of this conspiracy, and his death was going to fuck over the ones who took Vanessa. Bang! What the fuck was that? Bang! 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 Somebody was shooting in the same building as us. I turned and looked back down the hallway. "Well, how about that?" Spencer taunted from behind me. "Looks like you might need to preserve your ammo." The gunshots continued. Dozens of them now. Out there, beyond that hallway, there was a firefight. It exploded in shots and then nothing. The door at the other end of the hall came crashing off the hinges along with a large chunk of the wall. The beast was there, holding the sledgehammer. And this time it wasn't alone. Behind it were two more creatures, just as huge and terrifying. Their bodies all matched. Their clothes, their height, and their wretched smell. But the heads on the other two were different. One had a somewhat human face. No hair, no ears, no nose, and no lips. Its skin chalk white. Its head swollen up to an unnaturally large size. Its eyes red and bulging. The third one's head was barely more than a skull covered in red and pink oozing boils. One eye socket was vacant, the other held a single bloodshot eye. Its mouth was just a red skeletal smile. At their feet lay the bodies of several deputies. I pointed the gun and fired. Bang! Click, click, click. I kept pulling the trigger but... Son of a bitch! Franklin had only given me one bullet. I slammed the door to the holding room shut and scanned the area for weapons, but of course there was nothing. Without even thinking, I got inside of the empty cage, closed the door behind me, and locked it. It didn't take long for them to break the second door down. The creatures stepped into the room, their heads nearly touching the ceiling as they all three piled in and walked right past me to Spencer's cell. He approached them with a big smile and said, "What the hell took you so long?" They all grabbed the door to Spencer's cage and pulled. The metal bent and snapped free at the hinges, and then, suddenly, Spencer Middleton was free. The creature stepped back against the wall, allowing him the space to walk past. As he left the room, he looked back at me and said, "See ya around." I stood in the corner, watching the monsters as they followed him out the door. They weren't here for me, and now that they had what they wanted, they were done and gone. I waited there in the cell, staring at the door until I couldn't take it anymore and ran to the toilet in the corner to throw my guts up. I had failed. Failed hard. And now it was only a matter of time before somebody found this bloodbath and pinned the whole thing on me. I still have the keys. I could make a run for it. Grab Jamie, make a break for New Orleans. Find a good attorney, or even slip off the grid for a while. There was no chance for justice anymore. I'd lost the war, and now I needed to make a strategic retreat. I spit the last of the bile into the toilet and pulled the handle, images of carnage and monsters still fresh in my mind while I tried to work out the plan. This next part was going to be rough, but I needed to get through it. Climb past the bodies. Find one with car keys. Take another car. "Hey, detective?" I turned around to see that psychopath standing there alone on the other side of the bars. "What? Why did he come back?" My words caught in my throat, but he didn't seem to mind guiding the conversation. "Looks like something you ate must not have agreed with you, huh? Hey, before I go, I wanted to ask you something." He extended his hand between the bars, and when I saw what he was holding, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "In case you were interested, my offer is still on the table. What do you say? Do you want to know where to find her? That fucker had come back with a pair of pliers. I crossed the tiny cell to where he stood, reached out, and took them from him. He smiled a wicked smile, and I looked at the tool in my hands. Don't let him see you flinch. I ran my tongue across my teeth, trying to decide which one I would miss the least. I settled on one of my top bicuspids and put the pliers into my mouth. I can still feel the sensation of the metal touching my tooth, the way it shot up my nerve into a spot below my sinuses as I pulled and wiggled it, trying to yank it free while Spencer choked on his own laughter. When I finally had it detached from my jaw, the blood was pouring steadily. I spat a mouthful onto the floor and placed my tooth in Spencer's outstretched palm. Then I ripped a piece of cloth from my sleeve and bit down on it to stop the bleeding, while Spencer inspected it like a diamond assessor. Once he was satisfied, he told me where I would find Vanessa's body. I walked into the gas station looking and feeling like shit. A quick scan of the place told me that there weren't any customers in there. Behind the counter, Jack sat typing on his laptop. Toulouse leaned on the counter next to him, reading a magazine. When they saw me, I heard Jack say, "Check it out. The detective is still alive." Toulouse nodded and said, "Yeah, look at him go. Good for him," before turning his attention back to the magazine. My stomach turned and I went straight for the bathroom where I started dry heaving into the sink. If there had been anything left in my stomach, I'd have lost it there. How am I even going to do this? I looked at my reflection in the mirror and noticed that the man dressed as a cowboy was standing in the corner behind me. I spun around and screamed at him. "What the fuck? Who the fuck even are you, man?" He was thankfully wearing all of his clothes this time, including a red bandana around his neck and a cowboy hat. With a wry smile, he held out a ball-peen hammer and said in a calm voice, "Make good decisions." I can't explain why, but that weird sentence hit me with a sense of calm and renewed focus. I took the hammer, thanked him, and left the bathroom. The wall behind the notice board. That's where you'll find her. Jack and Toulouse didn't seem nearly surprised enough by what I was doing, smashing a huge hole into the wall of the gas station with a hammer. I kept swinging, breaking the hole open wider and wider, and I didn't stop until the wall was gone, exposing the dry, shriveled corpse of a young girl inside. From the looks of her, she had been dead for a long time. Her skin had turned gray and her face was unrecognizable. But her clothes still looked clean and new. A pair of blue jeans and a yellow t-shirt. O'Brien was the first on scene. She wrote up the official report, which I got a look at a couple weeks later. An unknown man came into the gas station, broke a hole in the wall, and revealed the corpse of a young missing girl. The body was dried of all blood post-mortem, which was probably responsible for the accelerated mummification process. DNA samples and dental records proved conclusively that this was the body of Vanessa Riggin, but I knew the truth. That wasn't my niece. Spencer was always very clever in the way he worded his offer. "I'll tell you where you can find the body of a certain girl." He had been referring to the double the whole time. There was a funeral, but neither Jamie nor I bothered going. I moved some money around and got the kid out of town. I won't say where he is, but believe me when I say he's in a safe place now. As for my legal troubles, well, they actually went away on their own. One final departing gift from the ones in charge, maybe? Besides, it's hard to arrest somebody for killing the sheriff when the sheriff isn't dead. Yeah, I got a message not too long ago from O'Brien. Clyde showed up to work that next day, and everybody's decided to pretend he never gave himself amateur brain surgery. In fact, there's no record of anyone dying in that nice little peaceful town the whole time I was there. I had almost convinced myself that the entire thing was a stress-fueled delusion, but yesterday I got a package in the mail at my office with no return address. The only thing inside was Donnie's old brown jacket. Then last night I got the phone call. "Hey, Uncle Eric?" It was a girl's voice. Yeah, this is Eric. Do you know who this is? Vanessa. They told me I can talk to you for a second. Where are you? I don't know. Some kind of hospital, I think. What is this? What's going on? I don't know. There's a man here who wants to talk to you. No, Vanessa, don't dash, hey detective. She handed off the phone, and I recognized his voice instantly. Spencer. What do you want? Me? I don't want anything. I just thought I'd let you know that despite all of my objections, they're taking really good care of Vanessa. Please. Is that what you want to hear? You want me to beg? Please don't hurt her. Just let her go. It's already too late for that. Even if she went home right now, there's no way anyone would ever believe that she was the real one. Even you right now have your doubts, don't you? The line between what's real and what isn't has started to blur so much that there might as well not be one anymore. And that's what they want. They want you doubting your own eyes. They want you to wonder who's real and who's been replaced. Because that's part of the attack. When you can't trust the person next to you, that's when they'll know they already 1. It's a brave new world, detective. And if I ever see you again, I'll skin you alive. The line went dead. I've tried tracking the number, but even my computer guy has told me it's a high-tech dead end. It's been months now since I started looking for my lost niece. And I've used this time to prepare. Next time I go back to that town, I'll be ready. I won't get caught off guard. And when I finally find her, there's going to be hell to pay. Spencer isn't a complicated guy. I understood his message good and well. It sounded like a warning, but it wasn't. It was an invitation.